Good evening. In the last hour, the United States and Iran have both announced a 2-week ceasefire. Trump posted it on Truth Social, as you can see, and Iran has confirmed it through their Tasnim news agency, their official state media. The bombing is going to stop, and before I say anything else tonight, I want to say this clearly and without hedge, guys. Thank God. I've been praying for exactly this for 39 days. And I will gladly lose every dollar of my trading positions if it means one family doesn't have to bury their child tomorrow. I see this as the answered prayers of the entire planet. I see this as confirmation that our prayers worked. Now, I do want to tell you guys, and there's plenty to talk about still, so stay tuned. What I have to tell you, nobody on cable news is going to tell you right now. The United States and Iran have announced two completely different versions of the same deal. Trump posted that the ceasefire is conditional on the complete, immediate, and safe opening of the Strait of Hormuz, and Iran's confirmation says that they're granting 2 weeks of passage as a goodwill gesture, with Iranian control over the strait continuing. Those are not the same deal. Trump is describing permanent, unconditional reopening. Iran is describing a 14-day temporary window that they can grant and can revoke. Both sides agreed to a ceasefire. Both sides are publicly describing different terms. Only one of them can be true. And the one who physically controls the choke point is the one whose version matters, and that's Iran. So here's what actually happened. Trump backed down. He dropped the impossible demand. He let Iran keep control of the strait, and he's selling that to his domestic audience as a victory. And here's the part nobody on cable news is going to tell you tonight. Even in the best possible case, even if Iran is completely sincere, even if every ship is welcome to transit starting tomorrow morning, the strait cannot physically return to normal operation in 14 days. Iran put estimated between 5,000 and 6,000 mines in the water. The 1991 precedent for clearing less mines than that took over 2 months. The U.S. has decommissioned all of its Gulf minesweepers as of last September. War risk insurance markets need weeks to reactivate. Shipping contracts need weeks to rewrite. You cannot fit months of physical recovery into a 14-day political window. The market is pricing in a normalization that cannot physically happen. Oil is down. This is outdated. I think it's down more than 9% now. It's down 15%, which is great news. Believe me, I'm not unhappy about it. But I just want to caution against immediate optimism. The entire purpose of my stream tonight was to tell you guys about the economic damage that this war is doing, has done, and actually will continue to do until all of these situations or these basically the status of the strait, the status of everything in the Middle East can actually return to peacetime conditions. And we are not yet in that state. So the peace is real, partially, but the damage is real, completely. And rationing is coming, regardless, and it's already here. And of course, prophecy is not permission. I'll explain all four of those things. So I had a plan. I had a great plan. Yeah, please hit the thumbs up and like and subscribe if you guys will. This is a new concept for me to be covering the news. I'm doing my very best. I had a whole plan of how to cover it because I thought that we were running into a deadline, and obviously I thought we might be reading some really awful headlines. And so now we're not going to. This is actually the best possible headline, the best possible outcome. But I think it's important that we kind of take stock of what just happened. Part of me just wants to celebrate. I think we should all celebrate that there's no bombs dropping tonight. I don't know about you guys. If you've been following the news, I woke up this morning feeling pretty awful, feeling pretty confused. getting ready for my live stream. That was a good distraction from the idea that, and I don't know if you guys read the tweet. I should put it on screen. I don't know if I can find it. But here's the first tweet that we should look at. This was the tweet on Easter. Trump released this tweet. Tuesday will be power plant day and bridge day all wrapped in one, Iran. There will be nothing like it. Open the fucking strait, you crazy bastards, or you'll be living in hell. Just watch. Praise be to Allah. President Donald J. Trump. So there he is mocking Islam on Easter Sunday. This is the level to which we have descended, and I'm going to get into some of the details of what's happened in this war, and it's just incredible. You're not going to hear any of these facts that I'm going to share with you on most other channels or from most other sources. In the West, this kind of information is not going to be presented to you because it is not good information for the West or for Donald Trump, to be honest with you. All right, so let's see here. My notes are half of them are not going to be useful tonight. So, I mean, most of them are useful. I would say I can still pretty much do the whole presentation, but I don't know if my notes are going to work for me because they're based on the idea that we were going to be facing this ultimatum. So anyways, welcome to the stream, everybody. My name's Danny. I'm with Way of Service. I'm live every Tuesday at 7 p.m. Today we're early because I thought we were going to have to get ready for this ultimatum, but the ultimatum has been postponed or canceled. The war has been canceled, which is great news for every human being on the planet. I'll tell you that. I want to say hi to the chat. Thank you guys for showing up. I see there's a lot of you here, and it's great to see you. We've got Ian and Eleanor, Hannah, Susan, and Matthew all in the chat. Ian says, we might have avoided the end for now. Certainly have avoided the end for now. I would say that's a safe bet. I thought I'd be having breakfast with Jesus tomorrow morning. Hannah says, wouldn't have argued with that. Yeah. They were talking about nuclear weapons being used just a couple hours ago. There was a headline that Israel was thinking about using nuclear weapons. I saw a tweet on X that I think really kind of nailed it. It was like, the more crazy rhetoric I see coming out of Trump, the more likely it is that nothing's going to happen or that he's going to back down. And in fact, the taco, Trump always chickens out, was the big, it's been the meme. It's the meme in the trading world, at least. And for those of you following the news, you probably heard this idea. That's what I thought this was when I first saw this tweet come out, this Truth Social, where Trump says, so what did he say here? He says, I agree to suspend the bombing and attack of Iran if they open the Strait of Hormuz. So he puts it in this very confusing way. It was a very confusing tweet. And then, luckily, Iran agreed to it. So that's really the big deal, is that Iran agreed. That's what makes this different from the 8 other times this has happened over the last 3 weeks, where Trump has said, we're totally about to have peace, and then more senseless bombing was happening. More innocent people were being killed every day, even though they were talking about peace. So really the bottom line here is this was an awful thing. This war was awful. And it's going to have real repercussions on every single one of us. And I want to go over those repercussions shortly. And also, I don't want to say this almost. I don't want to put it out in the universe, but, let's pray that this ceasefire holds and turns into a permanent peace. And I'm very hopeful that it will. I actually asked the I Ching about this the other day, and it told me limitation changing into joy. And I thought one of my interpretations of that was, this means a ceasefire is coming. Basically, they were going to stop themselves. They were going to limit what they were doing, and then it would result in joy basically for the entire planet. And I feel like right now, spiritually, I'm like part of billions of people celebrating. I think literally billions of people right now are celebrating this declaration of peace. Yeah, it's a great thing. I wish it would happen in Ukraine, honestly. I can't believe that Ukraine's war has been continuing. The amount of people that are getting killed over there. And it's such a shame because, it shows you where most people's heads are at. Most people are interested in their economic benefit. And this war was, and I'm going to get into the actual numbers. I'll just preview this for you guys so you can see what I wanted to present to you. So I actually used AI. Hey, we just hit the, okay, here we go. The deadline has passed. The time has elapsed, right? So, and now it's green. I'm glad it should be green, right? Because it's over and it doesn't matter. But this counter I created doing a lot of research, using AI to help me do the research on what the economic damages of this war are. And you can see here, this damage is continuing. This counter is not incorrect. This is the correct damage. It's still continuing. The damage of this war will continue until all of the mines have been cleared and all of the infrastructure has been rebuilt. And that's going to take years. Okay. So that is really, that was one of the main things. The reason I'm doing this stream, and I'm going to get to the spiritual aspect and the philosophical aspect of this and what it means for you spiritually and morally. Hint, it doesn't change anything. Spoiler alert. But really the reason I wanted to do this stream was to warn everyone about the economic consequences, because I think that they're being dramatically underplayed. And, we can see, if we can scroll down on my little widget that I created, oil has dropped dramatically. Let's look at an even more dramatic look at it. It's funny. It's only trading where it was last week. So it's not like, it'll probably drop more. Hopefully it will drop more, I would guess. But the fact of the matter is that it might not drop more, at least not a whole lot more in the short term. And the economic damage is profound. We will get more into this as we get into my presentation. I have some very important items to talk to you guys about. So let's see. This was the 7th iteration, and part of me feels bad now because I kind of feel like it worked. The ultimatum kind of worked. Give credit where credit is due. I think Trump has I know Trump has completely lost my support, but hey, peace happened. I think it might have happened through this ultimatum. I don't know. Maybe it could have happened without it. Actually, it definitely could have happened without it, to be honest with you. So maybe I shouldn't give him any credit, but we've been through this. We went through this. This was the 8th iteration of, claiming that we were going to have peace, and then basically the bombs kept dropping. So there's plenty of evidence that there was a lot of insider trading going on. Just this one example on March 23rd, Trump posted to Truth Social that, there were productive talks going on. Within 6 minutes, the S&P had gone up $2 trillion. And then 27 minutes later, Iran said, nuh-uh. And then $1 trillion disappeared. And there's evidence that there was insider trading just prior to this announcement. You can actually see it right here. I don't know if I can zoom in. You see this little bar right here before the big bar. That's where the insider trading probably occurred. This also happened with oil simultaneously. So anyways, he said there's peace talks, and then it dumped, and this move over the course of 1 hour moved $3 trillion, okay? $3 trillion in total swing. So that's the world that we're living in. The president is front-running trades, or somebody in this administration is front-running trades, and nobody's going down for this, right? It's the e-files all over again. I'll try not to say the word so I don't get shadow banned for another month like I did last time. This was what I thought was going to happen, but this is not what happened. So I I thought we were going to get another Trump chickening out. But hey, Iran came to the table and accepted the deal very quickly, which was great of them. I mean, they also were kind of faced with this ultimatum. And I think a big thing that happened is, Trump and the U.S. are kind of screwed in the long run. I mean, we'll see what the negotiations bring over the next 2 weeks. That's probably what will drive the market in a lot of ways. But, after there's a relief rally, the question is who's going to retain control over the Strait of Hormuz, right? There's just so much that moves through the Strait of Hormuz. These are the 10-point proposal that apparently the United States has agreed to. And this is Iran's website. This is Iran's press. So you got to take this with a grain of salt. But basically they say that they won, just like Trump said they won, he won, we won by doing a lot of damage to Iran. I don't know how that's winning, to be honest with you. The fact of the matter is that we've had all this economic damage that I mentioned, and just since we started the stream, another $350 million of damage. Okay, just as an example, and this is a moderate level estimate. But the question is, who's going to retain control over the Strait of Hormuz? According to the statement, the United States has agreed to a 10-point proposal that functionally commits Washington to non-aggression against Iran, great, continued Iranian control over the Strait of Hormuz. Now remember, before this war, Iran did not have control over the Strait of Hormuz. It was free passage, international waters. Now after the war, Iran controls the Strait of Hormuz. Acceptance of Iran's right to uranium enrichment, which is, again, one of the demands that was like the whole reason for the war, at least as I understand it, although most people don't really understand what the purpose of this war was. The lifting of all primary and secondary sanctions, that's a big win for Iran. Termination of all UN Security Council resolutions against Iran, another big win for them. Compensation for damages inflicted on Iran. I actually hadn't read that before. That's incredible. If that really happens, I mean, the Strait of Hormuz, who controls the Strait of Hormuz after this war answers who won the war. I saw that headline on CNBC the other day, and I think it's totally accurate. So the question is, who controls the Strait when the war is over? That's who won the war. If Iran also gets compensation for damages, and again, you got to take this with a grain of salt. This is from Iran's state-sanctioned news agency. Withdrawal of U.S. combat forces from the region. Now, that's another big L for the U.S. And that had kind of already happened. I don't know if you guys had looked into it, but Iran had functionally destroyed all of the U.S. Middle East bases over the course of this war using missiles. I think the U.S. was not ready for Iran's ability to respond in the region, and that might be why the war is over so quickly. Also, their ability to control the Strait of Hormuz. And finally, the cessation of war on all fronts, including against the resistance in Lebanon. So I'm hoping that this means that the war in Lebanon is also on a ceasefire. I would expect that to be the case because that was something Iran had stated as a requirement. Again, Trump didn't mention it, but that's where we're at. I think one of the... I don't know. I mean, I was going to say one of the worst things about this is watching Trump get caught up in so many lies and lies by omission. And it's just so embarrassing and horrible for the U.S. My original take on this war, especially once I understood the Strait of Hormuz problem, was that this is the end of the American empire. Amazingly, it parallels very closely with the Suez Canal incident in the 1950s, where the British Empire finally collapsed when they tried to use their military to control the Suez Canal and were unable to do it. And they had to withdraw. And that's basically exactly what just happened to the United States. The United States, and it was an absolute unforced error. That's what's so enraging about this. This war has senselessly destroyed, in my estimates, almost $1 trillion. I would say it's probably more like $3 trillion in economic value. And that number is still going up. That number is going to keep going up until there is a complete return to pre-war conditions. And all signs show that that's going to take years especially because some of the infrastructure that was damaged has already been confirmed that it's going to take 5 years to repair. So this is a completely unforced error. As I said before, the Strait of Hormuz was wide open, and then the U.S. and Israel killed a bunch of people, destroyed a lot of stuff, and wasted a lot of munitions and money. And for what? For now that Iran controls the Strait of Hormuz. This is not a good outcome for the United States geopolitically. This is a great outcome for humanity as far as the war being put to a stop being put to the war. Absolutely. But it was a self-inflicted wound, as war is. War in general is a self-inflicted wound that humanity has applied to itself throughout the decades or, throughout the millennia, throughout human history that we know of. And it seems to me that in almost every case we can resolve our differences without trying to kill each other. But that's, that might be a little bit beyond the scope of this presentation, but we'll get into some more details. Let's see. I feel if I seem a little disorganized, it's because my outline and my presentation was based on nothing happening, basically. That's what I thought was going to happen. It was just going to continue. The war was going to continue. They were going to pretend that, they escalated. Trump said that he was going to destroy the whole country in 4 hours. The U.S. military does not have the capability to destroy Iran in 4 hours without using nuclear weapons. If we use conventional weapons, I think I did the math, it would take like weeks and more missiles than we have. We don't have enough missiles. We used up 9 years of cruise missiles in the first 2 weeks of this war. It's going to take 9 years to replace the missiles that we fired in 2 weeks of the beginning of this war. Okay, and those missiles are missiles that we've paid for with our tax dollars. They're supposed to be deterrent against the enemies of the United States. They've now been fired, exploded, and will take 9 years to build back. For what, right? For a strategic loss of the Strait of Hormuz. That's what it's looking like. So this is what the U.S. was facing. The U.S. was facing a asymmetry in costs. Iran was able to use $20,000 Shahed drones, and they were being intercepted by $4 million Patriot missiles. That's a 200-to-1 cost favor in Iran's favor. So this slide, now I have to shift my, oh, jeez. All right, I got to turn off my alarm. Bear with me, folks. All right, I'm back. Sorry about that. I'm supposed to silence my phone. I've been scrambling to figure out how to organize this presentation with all the news pouring in. All the news was pouring in basically in the last half hour right before I came live. So I hope you guys can cut me some slack. I know my regular viewers are, but this slide is showing you why the U.S. lost the war, basically. 850 Tomahawks fired. That's 9 times the annual production. Several years to replace. Yeah, that's what you got. I just had a terrible thought about the generals refusing orders. There's a lot of stuff that happened that's irreversible. And maybe that's really what we should look at. Some of the irreversible things that have happened and the very disturbing reality of it. And again, I don't want to speak this into existence, but I think it's important to warn you guys. This might not be the end of the war. The U.S. and Israel started this war, and I think they were caught off guard by Iran's ability to respond, and they've already attacked Iran twice during negotiations. So are they going to attack Iran again during negotiations in the next 2 weeks? I really wouldn't put it past them. I really wouldn't say that that's out of the question. Now, I think it would be a really bad idea. I mean, obviously, it'd be a really bad idea, especially because, I mean, I don't know. I'm surprised. I mean, Iran wanted to end the war too. They admitted that they were going to have an economic collapse in their country. They were facing even more bombardment. They don't have any way to defend in a meaningful way against the incoming missiles. All they can do is send outgoing missiles to try to tell the enemy to stop, and that's kind of what happened. Is the enemy stopped, but it's a mess. This is a big mess, and we'll have to see what happens in the next 2 weeks. I'll keep praying for peace, and I think the fact that peace was declared today is the first step towards peace. And even if both sides are unhappy with the outcome, that doesn't mean that peace won't remain. But I do want us to, maybe the most important thing is that we can keep our leaders' feet to the fire. We're not going to accept a return to this war, right? All right. So this war got 14% of Ukraine's coverage, and while it's way more impactful for the United States. I don't know if you remember when the Ukraine war started, there was just an incredible propaganda campaign to get public support behind Ukraine. And I don't want to take a big position, but obviously Russia was the belligerent in that war. Russia's the one who invaded. They're the ones who took the first shot. And to me, the people who took the first shot, they really bear 95% of the responsibility for the war. But the Iran coverage was almost nothing. And some of the things that happened in this war, you just probably have no idea about. And the reason for that is this has been the most restricted war coverage since World War II. There is zero embedded journalists. All these other wars had 600, hundreds of journalists there with the military. This time there are none. There have been 12 senior generals fired since Hegseth took over as the Secretary of War, and it used to be the Secretary of Defense. They decided to change it to the Secretary of War. I think Defense was a better name. Don't you guys think? That includes that 12 generals fired. If you guys heard about this over the weekend, that's the top general of the army was also dismissed over this past weekend. This is just part of the long list of damage that has been caused by this war. The FCC chairman was threatened for fake news. The GI rights hotline had 212 conscientious objector calls in half of March, which is a high number. And a federal judge declared that the Pentagon press credentialing rules were unconstitutional. So, from what I see, this market is in deep denial. The level of the correction in the market is so much less than what the actual economic impact is going to be. And it's going to shake out over the next 2 weeks and over the coming months. And that, again, was the purpose of my presentation, was to tell you guys about this. So peace deal, Strait reopens, everything goes back to normal. But even if peace is declared tonight, which it was, peace was declared tonight, so that's fantastic. The damage is already measured in the trillions. In a lot of ways, the Middle East is the heart of civilization. And we're going to go over all of the raw materials that come out of the Middle East and are the building blocks of every aspect of our civilization. There are some things that are irreversible about this war, like food prices this fall. Food prices this fall are going to be very high, and there may even be some shortages. Now, I hope not, but it's possible. What I saw was that they had closed the strait. You can see there this surgical closing of the strait and the oil being pumped. So this is the heart of civilization that they were striking. They were stabbing the heart of civilization over and over. It was basically a heart attack. Like the artery of the Strait of Hormuz was clogged up for, however many months it's been. I guess it's been a month and a half where it was clogged up. And it's going to continue to be, because in order for things to actually continue through, we're going to need, the tankers need insurance. I think there's a bunch of mines in the strait. We'll probably see that as a headline coming up. And so all these raw materials that come out of the Middle East are still going to be bottled up. So for those of you who don't understand the Strait of Hormuz, here's a simple map of it. Basically, Iraq, Kuwait, Bahrain, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, UAE, all of them have to ship everything that they make, or they've already built the infrastructure to ship everything that they make out of this Persian Gulf into the Strait of Hormuz, out into the ocean where it reaches the rest of the world. So for the last 6 weeks, we have had no movement through this. So all of the raw materials have been sitting here, and the production has actually been shut down because they have no place to put the production. So that's permanent loss of production to the world economy. So the Strait of Hormuz, this is the key. It's 21 miles wide at its narrowest. It carries 20% of the world's oil and 33% of the world's LNG. That's liquid natural gas. It's been closed since day 2, since day 3 of the war. Today is day 39, and so that's over a month. It used to transit, it used to be 138 ships per day, and in that time, it's been between 13 and 48 per week, which is 5 to 8% of the normal amount of traffic. We also believe that there's thousands of mines in the strait, and there are 2,000 ships stranded. The U.S. used to have minesweepers in the Gulf and got rid of them just last year. Iran has asked for a permanent toll now of $2 million per tanker paid in Chinese yuan. Now, if you understand anything about the U.S. empire or the petrodollar, basically the U.S. has derived the dollar's strength and its status as a reserve currency by making sure that all oil in the Middle East is transacted in dollars. Now, Iran is saying you need to transact in Chinese yuan. This is a direct attack on the U.S. dollar. And of course, you can't print the Strait of Hormuz open. We can't print our way out of this economic problem. In literally every other economic disaster over the last 26 years, even in the crash of 2001, the Federal Reserve dropped interest rates to 0%. So that's basically printing money. But you can't print the Strait of Hormuz open, and you can't print these raw materials back into existence. They're lost forever. All right. See if I can sort of use my outline. This outline's in tatters because I'm jumping all over the place. Okay. So tonight's ceasefire changes exactly nothing about what I'm showing you tonight. Even if the ceasefire holds, and even if Iran is completely sincere, even if every ship is welcome to transit tomorrow morning, the strait cannot physically return to normal operation inside the 14-day window. First of all, there's the mines, the thousands of mines. And the biggest thing is the war risk insurance. Lloyd's of London and the other war risk underwriters won't write policies until they see verified safety, sustained clearance, and a stable framework. That takes weeks to reactivate. So basically, the traffic through the Strait of Hormuz it'll probably go up a little bit, but it's not going to, I don't think it's going to get above 20% of its pre-war levels for weeks. So the market's pricing a normalization that's mathematically impossible in the time window. So at the end of 14 days, either A, a permanent deal is signed, which requires both sides to agree on terms that they currently describe as incompatible, or B, the window expires and the strait is still non-functional and the war resumes. Now, here is the key. This is the key this is basically why I gave this presentation, is this next page. So James Hamilton of the University of California, San Diego, one of the most respected oil economists alive, he said that in 10 of 11 U.S. recessions since World War II, they were preceded by oil price spikes. Every historical episode of 5 to 7% of global supply disruption produced recession. In 1973 was the Arab oil embargo, which interrupted 7% of the global supply. In 79, the Iranian Revolution interrupted 7% of the global supply. In 1990, the Gulf War interrupted 8 to 10% of the global supply. And in this scenario, about 20% of the global supply was interrupted or disrupted. And that's just oil, okay? Yeah. When you look at 1973 and 1979, in both, we lost about 5 million barrels per day. These crises were led to a global recession. Today, we've lost 12 million barrels per day, more than 2 of these oil crises put together. Every previous oil shock transmitted through demand. Now, here's the big difference between previous shocks and this one. Prices spiked, and so consumers cut back, which is where you got the reduced production because the prices dropped. That led to a recession. The defense was built for that. There's the Fed put, which encourages people to keep spending. There's the strategic petroleum reserve and fuel efficiency and savings. But this shock is on the supply side. It's not that people choose not to buy. It's that the oil does not exist to be bought. You cannot efficiency your way out of an empty fuel tank. The Fed cannot print fertilizer. Okay? And here's the biggest key about what's happening. This is not just oil, okay? So the 20%, this is just oil, but there's far more going on. It's not just oil. There are 11 critical commodities that flow through the Strait of Hormuz. For 10 of them, there are no strategic reserves anywhere on Earth. That's 11. The 11th being oil. There's a strategic reserve for that, but there's not a strategic reserve for the other ones. The strategic reserve does not hold helium, urea, liquid natural gas, aluminum, sulfur, polymers, naphtha, or jet fuel. So I want to walk you through 4 of these so that you can multiply the feeling by 3. I'm not sure. I use Claude to help me. There's a multiplier, and I think that, is it on this number here? Yeah, the 5x input-output multiplier. This result, this is $250,000 every second of cost, is a result of the raw materials being worth 5 times their value once they make it out into the economy, okay? So let's start with jet fuel. 20% of global refined jet fuel came through the Strait of Hormuz. Jet fuel degrades in storage, so there's no strategic reserve anywhere. European hubs are already days away from being out of jet fuel. Scandinavian carriers have already canceled more than 1,000 flights. The airline BP Italia says they have shortages at 4 different airports. And U.S. West Coast depends on Asian imports that aren't coming. So that's where we are right now. Qatar exports 33% of the world's helium, and helium escapes its containers, so you can't stockpile it. There was a 35 to 48-day buffer before we lost all of our helium, and we're on day 39. So we're almost past the buffer. What uses helium? Semiconductor manufacturing and every MRI machine on Earth. Now, the semiconductor manufacturing, that's what's been propping up or keeping the stock market going, is the AI boom, this build out of computers, and that build out is going to be facing this shortage of helium. Again, this blockade of helium is going to continue because they're not going to transport at the level that they did before the war until they're totally sure that the war is over. So everybody's going to be kind of waiting for 2 weeks. Maybe some of it will get through, but it's not going to be at the same level as it was before the war. So what's going to happen to the chip buildouts? We're going to see a lot of headlines about delayed timetables for all of these companies that have been planning on building out more and more chips, more and more data centers. More important than that is fertilizer. Now, this is an incredible number. 36 to 49% of the global urea comes through the Gulf. No country maintains a strategic fertilizer reserve, and farmers apply in April and May is when they apply their fertilizer. So that window is closing right now. We're already halfway through it, and especially if you tack on the amount of time it's going to take for things to return to normal. India has already had a 30% cut to their fertilizer production. Bangladesh and Pakistan have shut down their production of fertilizer. So 2026 crop yields are locked in and cannot be fixed. It doesn't matter that peace was declared today for this particular resource. The damage of this war is already done. And I mean, we'll see if they can get any urea to the farmland within the next month, basically, is what they have to do. They have to do it in the next month. And like I said, they haven't even declared a true peace. No fertilizer carrying tanker is going to risk their lives, brave the mines, and have no insurance for their cargo. There are many $1 million of cargo just to, make sure that food prices are lower in the world. Like, these people are in it to make money. They're not in it to risk their lives for the sake of the global economy. So this fertilizer problem is probably the biggest problem that we're going to be facing in terms of inflation, and it's very bearish for the economy. Now, the fact that there was a ceasefire today, and I've been saying this basically as I've been working through this, we need a ceasefire immediately. Like, the urgency of the ceasefire was so high, and I think maybe even this is why Trump backed down, was because he knew that if the Strait of Hormuz remained totally closed, if this war continued, the economy was going to be in big trouble. And I think the economy is still in big trouble, but maybe there's a chance that this won't be like a multi-year recession. I think that there still probably will be a recession based on my calculations. And that means that the stock market will probably correct at 15, 20%. And more importantly, people are going to probably lose their jobs. And there's going to be a shakeout. There's going to be downstream effects over the coming months and years. And we'll get into the years aspect too. So that's fertilizer. Liquid natural gas. Qatar is the world's largest liquid natural gas exporter at 25% of the world's trade. Europe has only 30% of storage today, and they're required to get to 80% by November 1st to be ready for the winter. Without Qatari liquid natural gas, this is mathematically impossible. And again, it's not going to be moving through the strait anytime soon. The cost has doubled from $32 to $60 or 60 euros per megawatt hour. And Asian liquid natural gas is up 140%. Importantly, and this is what I referenced earlier, the liquid natural gas trains at Las Rafan, where they produce liquid natural gas in Qatar, was damaged in strikes. That put 17% of the world's capacity offline, and will require 3 to 5 years to repair. Okay? So you cannot print a liquid natural gas train at Las Rafan. There is, and I looked into the reason for this, there's a specialized giant turbine that they use that's on back order for at least 3 years. And so it's going to, and maybe, I would hope maybe they can jump the queue to get this done. But again, it's many months, if not many years, before 17% of the world's liquid natural gas comes back ready to produce again, okay? And that's if there's no more war, there's no more strikes on this facility, and the Strait of Hormuz remains open. And again, it's not really open yet. Based on the insurance market and all these things, it's not open yet. So, we're all kind of going to be wondering what's going to happen next. That's going to be the narrative going forward. What is going to be the fallout on the economy of all of this stuff that's happened? And I thought that my message tonight was going to be so urgent because I thought the war was going to continue, and it's slightly less urgent. I'll admit this message is slightly less urgent now, but it's still pretty urgent because I want you guys to be ready for what's coming, and don't fall into any belief or headlines that tell you that everything's just fine now. Everything's back to the way it was before the war. This war has already caused a ton of damage, and it's continuing to cause damage until it's totally resolved. All right. So let's finish this list. And there's 7 more things. I even saw an aluminum plant was hit today in Iran. I think it was in Iran. It might have been in another country. Aluminum, sulfur, polyethylene, polypropylene. Now, polyethylene and polypropylene, those are packaging, okay? So basically, medical supplies, food, all the packaging is going to be more expensive, which makes those products more expensive. Methanol, naphtha, and petroleum coke. All of them are in some way or in a major way dependent on the Gulf exports, and there's no reserve. Now it's years to rebuild. Ceasefire does not fix destroyed LNG trains. A ceasefire does not fix the mined waterways. It'll take months to remove those mines. And again, this has not been covered. I don't think anybody knows, what is the status of the mines in the Strait of Hormuz? Trump himself admitted that it's easy for them to just, put a mine in a fishing boat, drive it out in the middle of the Strait of Hormuz and just drop it in there. So the estimates that I've seen are that there are between 5,000 and 6,000 mines. It's going to take months to remove those mines out of the strait. The ceasefire does not fix the missed planting window. That damage is already locked into the food economy. The ceasefire fixes the narrative. It does not fix the physics. So that is where I got this counter from. And again, this is a conservative counter of the amount of damage that has been done and is continuing to be done by this war of choice and aggression. All right, I want to go to the chat. It doesn't look like you guys are saying too much. What do you guys think about all this? I want to, let's see, do I have a good chat prompt? I thought I had some good prompts. Let's see, I might find it. Don't forget to hit that like and subscribe, folks, if you're enjoying this. Hey, if you're happy about peace, put an amen in the chat, okay? If you're happy about the end of hostilities for the moment, put an amen in the chat. I'm going to do it as well. Amen. I am reading and responding to all chats. So anybody wants to put in a chat, I will respond to it. Let me read what we've got so far. Susan says, good evening. Matthew says, amen. Matthew says, real or not, price of gas went way up. Not likely to come down anytime soon. This whole generation of common Iranians will be traumatized by this. What cost will that have? I wonder if the Iranian women will now be allowed to go to school. That will have a huge impact on the economy. Are Iranian women not allowed to go to school? I don't know if that's true, but it might be. I know that there was an elementary school that was all women that was hit in the first day, and 180 children were killed. So I would think that means that they can, but that might just be primary school, elementary school. Yeah. Well, regardless of how they treat their women, there's no reason to bomb their country. Okay. That's my position on that. Everybody says, Eleanor says, amen. Amen. Matthew says, amen. Thank you, God, for peace. Ian says, I was hoping for Trump's fireworks tonight. Yeah, I feel like you shouldn't say that, Ian. I was trying to convince you to understand that this is not what humanity wants. And, you know, I've talked about this on the channel, the Yuga framework that shows that we're in an ascending age. And I hope that this is proof that we are in an ascending age, because I think, and I'll go through some of the evidence tonight, you know, the people in power wanted this to be a bloody, awful fight. And I think that the people in power, like Hegseth, expected us to be able to totally steamroll Iran and kill a lot of them. And we already did kill a lot of them. I'm going to show you the damage that we've done, and it's pretty terrifying. Ryan says, let's condense our thoughts about this massively complex world into a little chat. Yeah, Ryan, that's your job, okay? Can you do that, please? All right, let's get back to the presentation. I've gone through all of the chats. You tell me what your guys' I want to know what your reaction is to this news. I want to know if I broke the news for you. That'd be interesting. I know most people don't follow the news like I do. So did I break the news for you? That's kind of fun. I'm doing my job as the alternative media. Ian says, the next generation might need the spoils of this war to sustain the living standards. Yeah, I mean, it's possible. I mean, I think that this is probably going to reduce the living standards in the U.S. Maybe. I mean, at least in the short term, it definitely will. The economic impact is going to reduce the living standards on the entire planet, probably over the next 12 to 24 months. But in the long run, it's really bad for the dollar, which is probably good for the rest of the world, that they're not under the hegemony of the dollar, but it will result in a reduction of American living standards. Yeah, I mean, you do understand, Ian, that Trump fireworks mean that like children were going to get killed. So I don't think that's a good thing to want to see happen. I understand that impulse. Okay, I do understand the excitement. It's, you know, there are so many pieces of witchcraft or mind tricking that the forces of evil use to get you to comply or consent to the ongoing evil, right? There's the inevitability. That's something we talked about in the previous stream on this topic. Everybody felt this inevitability of what was happening, that we couldn't stop it. And I did my best to prove that that's not true. There's the fear that it's going to happen, right? The protecting, the closing in of yourself, and, you know, kind of othering of the other side, the taking of sides. That's kind of what you're doing if you get excited about, you know, military action. And I think that's one of the reasons that wars happen, is that, you know, the people in the military, they romanticize war. They get, and I'm fascinated by technology. I'm fascinated by weapons technology, just as a nature of being a man and playing video games. You know, I've learned a lot about military technology from this war, and reading the coverage of, you know, the different weapons, the different aircraft that have been used. It's fascinating stuff. I think it's important to understand, if you're going to understand what's happening in the world, you know, what the course of these wars is going to be based on the technology. You know, the technology really decides what happens in the war. I think the fact that Iran had so many missiles and drones that were able to hit their targets is why this war ended sooner than it did, or that sooner than it might have if Iran had less advanced weaponry than they did. Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry, Eleanor. Now I see your questions. I apologize. Yeah. Eleanor says, so what should we all do about it? I mean, besides traditional prep stuff, what should we plan and do for the next couple of years based on this? Yeah, it's a good question, Eleanor. I should have included that. You know, I didn't want to tell people to prep. I mean, I think it does make sense to keep your gas tank filled. Maybe, keep extra food in the house, have a source of water that you feel confident about, have an emergency plan, build your community. But what I really want to do is to help people see that we're probably in for some hard economic times. Now, if this ceasefire holds and there's a permanent peace, it's going to be hopefully limited to just, a difficult year or two. So, maybe work harder at your job to make sure you keep your job, save your money, be careful about investing. I think that the market people are going to be excited tomorrow. I could check. I'm not going to check the market, but I think it's up like 2.5%, which is a huge move. And rightfully so. Peace was just declared. Oil just dropped $25. That's really good for the market. But after that initial reaction, we're going to have to see, and my research shows that there is going to be very serious continued damage to the economy. So I think it's important. And also people get ready for inflation, because inflation is going to increase and then the economy is going to decrease. We're still going to get that stagflation that everybody's been warning about. It's the worst situation. And that's why in the 1970s, if you had bought at the top of the market in 1973, you needed to wait until I believe 1984 to get your money back. Now, I hope that's not the case this time, but a lot of the math shows that it might take the stock market 10 years to get to another all-time high. I don't know if that's 100% true, but that's what the 1973 example shows. Now, if the Federal Reserve can't lower interest rates and stimulate the economy because they're trapped by the inflation that's been locked in by this war, that's where you see this good possibility that there's going to be a recession. Okay. Now, what do you do about a recession? To be honest with you, I've only lived through like a couple really small ones. The last really big recession was in 2009, and I was a young adult and I wasn't like handling a lot of money. I had a job, but I was actually teaching middle school science at the time. So, my job wasn't really in jeopardy, but what do you do in an economic downturn, in an stagflationary situation? We should all take a look at the 1970s and see what lessons can be learned from that, and maybe what ways we can invest to handle that. But just really being careful and knowing what's going to be coming down the pipe over the next few months, I think will be helpful. All right, what else do we have here? Yeah, Ryan says, I honestly wasn't aware of the specifics of this peace or ceasefire, so technically you broke this news to me, but my focus has been kept mostly elsewhere. Ryan, can you give me credit? I can't tell if you're giving me credit here. So I guess technically I broke the news for you. Okay, I guess technically I feel good about that. Thanks, man. Hannah says, I wonder if a reduction of living standards will turn more people back to what really matters and this world needs. Yes, Hannah, I agree with that. I actually, I had so many ideas, and this is one of the dangers of using AI to prepare for these live streams. I had so many ideas that some of them got lost in the shuffle, and I wanted to quote the Bible on that. Let's get our first Bible quote in. Let's see if I can pull it up. Let's see. Okay. God turns tragedy into good. Bible quote. Just put it on the screen so you guys can see what I'm doing. Yeah, Google never gives me... No, it never can give me the exact quote. It has such a hard time. I just want the quote. Yeah, is this it? Thought it was in Romans. We know that for those who love God, all things work together for good, for those who are called according to his purpose. I thought it was more specific than that, but that might be the quote. But basically, yes, I agree with you, Hannah. I hope and believe that this will ultimately serve the greatest good. I mean, that is how God's creation works. But in the short term, and I hope that I'm serving the purpose of that greater good by telling you about some of the impacts that are going to be coming from this war. And these impacts have not arrived yet. That's the big thing. This war happened. Hopefully it's over. But the impacts of this very, very destructive war, a lot of destruction happened in a very short period of time. So much destruction that if you model it on the 1970s, we're almost definitely going to get a severe recession. So that's kind of what we're facing. And hopefully good people like you, good people who are watching this live stream, and click like and subscribe if you agree. But by being prepared, you will avoid the negative effects, and maybe you will have some positive effects, or you can see the positive in it. So I feel like hopefully that's the role that I'm playing by delivering this message to you guys tonight. Matthew says, I believe people will be drawn more towards their family. Yeah. I mean, I hope so. And again, that's why I'm giving you this message, is so that you're more prepared and you're not blindsided by what's coming. Okay. Matthew agrees with Hannah. Maybe we need a reduction in living standards. I agree. I mean, I think, the U.S. population enjoys such tremendous wealth and such tremendous luxury compared to the rest of the world. A little bit of humbling probably going to go a long way. Ryan says, the people in the military live as near a different world as me as is possible in a 3 or 4 dimensional reality. Yeah, I mean, probably. That sounds accurate. I mean, I don't know though, Ryan, you might have a bit of a regimented life because you're working so hard. But yeah, I agree with you as far as the mindset is maybe what you're thinking about. The mindset of the military, especially the career military, they kind of glorify war and destruction and I don't want to call it murder, but that's kind of what it is. So I understand what you're saying. I think that's what you're saying, Ryan. Maybe you can clarify if I'm wrong. Eleanor says, yeah, Hannah and Matthew, I've heard more and more family members are living under the same roof. Maybe that will continue to increase. Right. Yeah, I mean, yeah, there's always a silver lining to every single thing, right? If the standard of living drops and less people can live separately, maybe people will get closer with their family. And for some people, that's maybe not a good thing, and for others it is. But I think overall, it's a good thing. If you're not close with your family, hopefully you can heal and repair and improve those relationships. Ian says, $1,000 per week Costco runs. Yeah, well, yeah, I mean, that's not bad advice, right? If we're going to be facing inflation, maybe now's the time to stock up on a little bit of extra food or on whatever it is that you want to buy. I mean, we're looking at a lot of inputs are going to be increasing in cost, already are increasing in cost, and that inflation is going to hit the market later. So if you buy the thing now, it's probably going to be cheaper. Yeah. I remember during the, I forget when the inflation was really bad, 2022, 2023, my wife would ask me, should I buy this? Should I buy this? Should I buy this? And I was like, buy everything. Buy everything, because it's going to go up in price. And it did. So I think that that's a good strategy facing inflation, if you can afford it. Obviously, don't buy everything and deplete your savings, because you're going to need your savings over the coming months and years. So make sure that you have a minimum amount of savings, and then the thing that you're buying is something that you're actually going to use or that you're actually going to need in that time period. Hannah says, if we can all learn to live in peace and understanding, multi-generational homes would be such a wonderful thing to return to. Yeah, And we just made our home a multi-generational home. I recommend it, especially if you have small children. Hint, hint, Hannah. Hint, hint, Tim is here just in time for me to deliver that message. All right. Matthew says, I would love to have my kids and their families move out to the farm with us. Yeah, well, maybe this will be a reason, tell them things might be getting a little bit worse in the near future. And again, I hope I'm wrong about all this, but the math says I'm not. The math says this is a real problem that's already baked into the cake. Okay. Now, it's great that we had a ceasefire tonight because it was just getting worse. It was just compounding, right? Not only is the stuff not making it through the Strait of Hormuz, but also every day that continued, all of the infrastructure was taking damage. Every day, more damage, more damage, more damage. That's going to be one of the biggest headlines. I guarantee you the sum total of the damage has not been figured out yet. How long is it going to take to get back to full capacity on all these different raw materials coming out of the Middle East? We don't know. And also remember, Iran is a large producer of a lot of these different things. Iran's a huge producer of oil. They're a big producer of liquid natural gas. And I bet they're a big producer of a lot of these other resources that are going to go up in cost. And these resources are all inputs into the economy. And so the increased cost of these inputs is going to filter into the economy and multiply through the rest of the economy. Hannah says it's no good. All right, well, I mean, you did just say, it would be wonderful. It would be wonderful, live in peace and understanding. It takes a lot of understanding to deal with the mess that is small children. Am I right? Am I right? Hannah says, I didn't know you were a school teacher. Yeah, I've mentioned that on stream a few times. Actually, I found my speech. We've got 9 viewers right now. I don't know if this is too far off topic. Why don't you guys tell me in the chat if you want me to read the speech I gave? So the story of my teaching career in very briefly, right? I did Teach for America, which is where they just take somebody who's smart in a tough subject like math or science, which I was, and just throw them into an inner city school. Okay. They give us a crash course on teaching over the summer, and then we just go and teach a year in school. And it's, oh man, is it tough. We're almost totally unprepared for this job. I had 144 students over 5 different classes, which is, almost an average of almost 30 students per classroom. It was totally insane. Inner city. Luckily I was part of the gifted program. I was teaching gifted kids. So I think if I was teaching the general public, I wouldn't have made it through the whole year, especially because I actually lost my father in January of that school year. And, I've talked about the healing story of healing my father. Really briefly, my father was basically dying, and I picked up a book called Your Hands Can Heal You, and I took it into the hospital room and started healing him, and every hour his temperature was normalizing. His temperature come down a full degree. His blood pressure was dropping. It was at like 210 over something, and it was dropping. It dropped all the way back down to 120 normal. Everything was normal by the morning. I did it all night. The doctors came in. So they said, we can't explain it, but he's improved on every single metric, everything that they measured him on. And that was absolutely life-changing for me. All of a sudden I realized that, prayer, energy healing, the ability to heal in this like magical way, in this miraculous way is real. And I was teaching science. So I wrote a speech for the kids that I was basically like, I can't tell you that I know shit. I mean, because of what I just experienced showed me that I was taught almost nothing about science. And that's where we're at as a civilization. We think we're so advanced, but we really know almost nothing about the true nature of reality, right? I mean, the mainstream viewpoint is materialism. There's no talk about God or the power of consciousness in the mainstream, and it's absolutely real. So I can read you guys that speech. I got one vote. I need at least half the viewers to say they want to hear the speech. Okay, so right now we have 6 people, so I've got one vote. I need at least 2 more votes if you want to hear the speech. Okay, let's see here. Ryan says, has anyone read People of the Abyss by Jack London? That's a multi-generational home living. Oh, fascinating. That's fascinating. People of the Abyss. The name sounds very foreboding, but it's about multi-generational home living. I hope it's not a horror story about multi-generational home living. Ryan says, I'm so grateful to live when I do. Reading stories like that gives perspective on human progress. Oh yeah, so that's an older book, I'm guessing, or a story from an older time. I don't know anything about it, so I'd love to hear more. Hey, Travis is here. Welcome, Travis. He says amen. Welcome to the stream. Ryan says, regarding buying food and fertilizers and food costs, can't help but think about a post Renee put out about how farms we have relationships with don't need fertilizer the way big farms do. Yeah, and that's fantastic. And if you guys want to know more about that, you should check out my interview with Ryan, the first one that I did many months ago, where we talk about that. And, that's the way forward. That's the new way of doing agriculture, the way that your farmers do it, Ryan. But the truth of the matter is that most of the world still eats food that comes through the industrial fertilizer system. And they're probably going to get hurt big time by the repercussions of this war. Now, maybe they won't. I mean, I don't know. Maybe there's a chance. Maybe there's a miracle coming. Maybe the crop yields will be just as good, and they'll be like, oh, we didn't need all that fertilizer. But I have my doubts, right? There's a reason it's a multi-billion-dollar industry. And I have this, God will protect the innocent, in my opinion, or at least for the most part, but there are going to be consequences of this war. And one of the big ones appears to be the fertilizer problem. It's probably the biggest impact is the fertilizer problem. All right, we got 3 votes. That's what I said. Oh, Matthew said yes. I guess I'm going to do it then. I'll do it then. I'll give you guys the speech, okay? I'll put it on screen. See if I can find it quickly. I want to speak frankly with you. That's it, isn't it? Come on, open. Not responding. What is this? Why do I always have some technical issue? All right, we got it. Funny enough, back then I was all about freedom. Now I'm about service because I feel like freedom is overrated, to be honest with you. Share the speech in the Discord channel. Okay. I'll share it here first. So this is the speech I gave to the 12-year-olds that I was teaching right after my father passed away, and I had healed him in the hospital. Yeah, I healed him, and then he passed away 3 weeks later. So he had been totally unconscious, and then he came back to life, and it was almost a terminal lucidity story. If you guys have watched that live stream, I talk about terminal lucidity, totally unexplainable by biological standards, that people whose brains are destroyed, their bodies are destroyed, all of a sudden they wake up and they're able to have normal conversations with their friends and family. Seems like a gift from God to allow people to say goodbye and to end things in a positive way with their family. My father said things to me he had never said, and he had a changed demeanor about him. He was like, "Oh, I want to do yoga with you," and he was saying all these loving things. He was a loving person, but he wasn't always expressive of it, and he was after this. But here's the speech, guys. I want to speak frankly to you. I want to be free with you. I have a message for you which I hope you are ready to hear. I trust the universe and myself enough to believe that we are together for good reason, and my deep desire to share this with you and everyone willing to hear it will not be denied. Just a brief note here. So I gave this speech to all 144 of my students. They're all like 12 years old. Okay. One of them asked me afterwards, he was like, Mr. Greenwald, what kind of drugs did you take before you came to school today? And then a really funny story, and I'll continue the speech, but the next day I got called into the principal's office and they showed me the speech. They had a copy of the speech and they said, you can't give this speech. And I was like, oh, oops, I already did yesterday. So they had a copy because they found it on the copy machine. I guess I accidentally left a copy there. And everything happens for a reason, because the principal literally told me, I agree with everything you said in this speech, but you can't say this. And I was thinking in my head, this is why I can't do this anymore. I'm not going to teach next year, because I can't stay in a system that will say to me, I agree with everything you said, but you can't say it. I'm out. That's not for me. Okay. We would not be together in this time and place if we did not will it to be so. I would add, if it was not the will of God. My message is freedom. I think you will agree that freedom, or the lack of it, is the only thing, the one thing that when perceived as missing makes our lives intolerable so often, and what is solely responsible for preventing us from the time of our lives every day. Repression of freedom is a horrendous message that has been ignorantly trumpeted over and over by the likes of me, and so unfortunately reinforced every day by the darker sides of our society and establishment. I gotta say, I'm impressed with my ability to write at the tender age of 20, I guess I was 23 or 24. We are told that if we were to exercise freedom, there would be great disaster. I say instead that there would be great utopia. This message of rejection of freedom leads us to hate and resist all that is represented by it. The lack of freedom is the opposite of who each of us actually is, and has its roots in fear. In my studies over the last few months, following what I can only call a personal and spiritual awakening, catalyzed by my father's illness, what I have found is that we are freedom, peace, and love at our core. You can choose not to believe me, but understand that when you grasp this truth, you can become who you truly are and tap into the power of all that is. What I refuse to do from this day forward is be the force in your life that attempts to subject you to a mental prison that says you must deny your true self, your core of freedom. Mr. Greenwald is no match for who you really are. You are so much than what you have been led to believe. You are literally the creator of your own reality. I have represented this other message, fear, because I was a slave to it myself. Until the life-changing events of my life only months ago, I never truly began the work of exploring freedom with every ounce of my being. I too had forgotten who I was, what really matters to me, and how to reach for my wildest of dreams. I became trapped in the thinking that I could not truly do what I want for so many thousands of reasons. Limiting beliefs, I now call them. We spoke briefly of these. They are all that hold you back, because you are a divine creator, and so is every other living thing. At the level of complete and pure truth, you do not owe anything to anyone. We owe nothing because that implies that we are not completely free. And isn't it far better to allow others to realize their own true nature as a creator of their reality? If we let them believe that their happiness depends on our actions, we are perpetuating the lie of fear. Once we set them free, and as a result, set ourselves free, everything that we then give them is just gravy, pure joy, the stuff of life. No longer will I distract myself from truth. No longer will I fight one lie with another. My desire is to use the light to banish the dark. Join me, if you will, in this pursuit. The knowledge and understanding of this path of light requires great awareness and personal responsibility. If indeed you literally create your own reality, this means you are responsible for your every experience. You can no longer play victim. Whatever we offer into the universe, we have returned to us as a manifestation of our own power. Thus, you must temper your self-indulgence with respect for the rest of creation, lest the disrespect be returned to you. Respect for yourself is happiness. Respect for others is peace. Out of peace flows all possibility for creation. The opposite of peace is destruction. This is quite prescient considering the war that we're talking about. Do not destroy anything but that which prevents peace. Create instead of destroying, and that which limits will collapse upon itself. Fear, love, and do not fear. Offer gratitude instead of hate. Find joy where there is sorrow. Clear away the darkness. This is the path I speak of. And so, where does this leave us? If I were completely in charge, my class would be one completely embodying and encouraging freedom. You would come and go as you please. I would offer you no grade, which I have come to find is the single biggest source of fear in the school system. You would be in charge of what you want to learn each day. Homework would be completely voluntary. However, I am not in charge. And if we are going to continue to work together and without causing too much destruction and chaos, we must learn to work in this dynamic, at least during these 46 minutes. It is my job to determine how to do this, and I intend to continue, as I feel I have done with varying success already, to search for concrete ways to adapt the system to serve us. What I am leaning towards is this. Grades will be determined by in-class activities. All homework will be voluntary and extra credit. I will not use fear of failure to force you to comply. And at least one class period topic a week will be determined by you. Give me spring break to come up with more, and your voluntary homework assignment is to bring me ideas to help align ourselves with learning how to exercise our freedom when we return together in a week and a half. It is a new quarter, a new day, a new breath. We control our future. Breathe in the power that we hold. So yeah, I gave that speech. I gave that speech to a bunch of 7th and 8th graders, 6th, 7th, and 8th graders. Yeah, I think it's pretty good. It was probably a pretty good moment for them. I had a lot of students tell me that they really appreciated me. I've had a few reach out to me over the years to tell me that I had a big impact on their lives that one year that I taught. So I hope that's true. I can see a lot of the seeds of wisdom that I now talk about here, 27 years later on this channel. 17 years later, not 27 years. But yeah. So that's the speech. What do you guys think? What do you guys think about that speech? You guys enjoyed it? Was your father resurrected like Jesus? I want to say yes. I want to say yes because I think we all are resurrected like Jesus. But I guess not because Jesus was physically resurrected, whereas the rest of us are spiritually resurrected. But as Jesus says, if, these great works and greater shall you do. So I think it is possible for us to physically resurrect like Jesus, although often it's better to just go to heaven and not try to resurrect your physical body. That's a complicated question. I'm not sure if you were serious about that, Ian. So Ryan says, for sure there will be some massive pain coming to the food system. The current book I'm reading is about the rise of Tyson Foods. It's also an interesting and eye-opening read. Yeah, for sure. Hannah loves the speech. Yeah, what do you guys think about my speech? Is that a little crazy? Can you imagine your middle school teacher? I gotta think about my middle school teachers. If one of them had given me that speech, I don't know if I'd be able to handle it, dude. That would have been pretty wild. I wonder how much of it went over their heads. I mean, probably a lot of it, but maybe the energy of it or some of the seed ideas had an impact on them. I look forward to my life review that we've discussed, and I'll be able to see, hopefully, the positive impacts that speech had on their lives. Hey, Sevens is here. Welcome, Sevens. Sevens Pattern, welcome. Matthew says, listening to you read it, I saw you painted blue like Mel Gibson in Braveheart, right? Yeah, I mean, that's the level of energy that I had, Freedom! I was just bursting at the seams after my spiritual awakening and then getting thrown back into this, box that is the government classroom. I was like, I can't do this normally. I am not going to do this the normal way for the rest of the year. I was not going to make it to the end of the year without really changing the rules, which you can see is what I did. Hannah said, my mom was my teacher, so I would have had a stroke. Yeah, I don't know if I can imagine your mom giving that speech, but maybe someday. That'd be cool. So, we still got all our viewers. I don't know about anybody watching the replay. They probably might have to skip that section because it is way off topic. I'll feed this into my AI and it'll be like, in the future, you probably shouldn't read some random speech in the middle of your live stream if you want people to watch the replay. Just a little bit of advice for you. Well, too bad, I guess. No big deal. I realized one thing about having a YouTube channel, you can either take it really seriously and like bust your ass every week and say the same thing every week in a monotonous, repetitive way so that the algorithm picks it up and you can sell your product. Or you can just do whatever the F you feel like doing and see what happens. And that's where I'm at right now. I'm going to do whatever I feel like doing. I'm going to share whatever I feel like sharing. And I think it's going to go great. That's my opinion. All right, well, let's go back to the topic because I still have a lot of stuff that I want to share with you guys. So as I mentioned earlier, right, 1973 was the easy version, and it took 20 years to recover in real terms. Oh, I give you guys a less of a time frame than that. Wow, so if you bought at the peak in 1973, you didn't get your money back until 1993. Right, that's because of inflation. So in nominal terms, it was like the 1980s, but in order to actually get the value of your investment back, you needed to wait 20 years. And considering that inflation is the big question here, I guess that's one of the big things here is, should we be throwing our money back into the market tomorrow just because they declared a ceasefire? It seems like the answer probably definitely not. I mean, yeah, I don't think so. So, and the S&P from 1973 went down almost 50%. There was a 16-month recession and inflation was at 12%. In 1973, it was a political valve. The infrastructure was not damaged. 2026 is a physical destruction. 30 to 40% of the Gulf refining is gone. In 1973, the Fed could ease, and they did. In 2026, they can't. The head of the Federal Reserve said the Fed put is off the table. That means the Fed ability to backstop the economy and the market is off the table. So the closure is the blocked artery. The bombing is the knifing of the heart of civilization. And then lockdowns are the anesthesia, okay? Lockdowns are already being deployed in testbed countries where in Bangladesh, they have fuel rationing. In Sri Lanka, they're having a Wednesday holiday. In New Zealand, they have a fuel alert system. In the Philippines, Thailand, Vietnam, Indonesia are emergency measures. So, and again, hopefully with the ceasefire, this won't get as bad as it was going to get if things continued. But we're probably looking at some rationing and possibly, I've heard people say the words energy lockdown. So that was one of my theses tonight. Theses. Before we jump to that, I want to make sure I covered all the points that I wanted to make in that section. Yeah. Okay. All right. Forget about that. Let's see. It's already all on the slide. So basically, the idea is that what I saw coming and still might happen. I mean, I don't know how bad this is. It's really hard to put your finger on it, especially with the fact that most of these impacts have not arrived yet. But they might still say, hey, we need to do energy lockdowns because the product has not made it to the shores. It hasn't made it there. So there's a physical shortage. And so you can't drive on Wednesdays, right? That's what that Sri Lanka thing says. You can't use X amount of gasoline. That's what petrol is. They call gasoline petrol in other countries. So that's in some ways an energy lockdown. Now, what is an energy lockdown? Well, we went through this in 2020, and that's what this graph is. This is the proof of concept. They locked down the whole world's economy, and they made oil go negative. I don't know if you guys remember this. I remember because I'm a trader. But oil went negative. It was trading at a negative price because it was too expensive to store. People didn't want to take delivery of it. And so the contract was paying people to take oil. And this was a result of the lockdowns. All of a sudden, the price of oil plummeted. And so the mechanism is they drive up the price of oil with a shortage, and now they have the excuse to lock down. And what does the lockdown do? It gives them more control over you and the economy. And they had their test run already. All right. And before we get into the next section here, I want to make sure. So that's the economic argument, okay? Make sure you hit that like and subscribe button if you're enjoying it. Let's see what Ryan says. He remembers this. Tim says, your mom and dad, by the way, Hannah. Yeah, Hannah, you better give credit to your dad, too. He might have given that speech. I could see your dad giving that speech. Ryan says, I'm glitching. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe I'm saying the wrong thing. I thought I've kept it sort of clean. We'll see if I get shadow banned. Ryan says, I do remember that, and I remember that many traders who purchased the negative oil did not have their contracts honored. Yeah, many such cases, Ryan. There's a lot of occasions where crazy things have happened in the market and traders just get totally screwed. That's pretty bad. That's pretty bad to purchase a negative contract and not get it honored. I mean, there's plenty of that going on. There's so much lying and deception happening every day, especially during this war. It was just at maximum volume, maximum deception. Matthew says, I just ordered more fuel. Yeah, you can see why I asked you, Matthew, about getting fuel. So yeah, there's your proof of concept. The energy lockdowns still might be coming. I hope not, but still might be coming. So, everybody is watching this war unfold. They thought that we're watching rational actors pursuing strategic goals through warfare. You might not agree with warfare, but maybe you agree with the goals. No more nuclear weapons. I don't even know what the other complaints about Iran were. No nuclear weapons and something else. I guess they have proxies that are attacking Israel. But we engaged in this war, and so we're thinking that our military is pursuing objectives. But this is what actually happened. In Iran, the strikes hit 600 schools, 307 medical facilities, 30 universities, 120 heritage sites, 17 Red Crescent centers, 100 ambulances, the Pasteur Institute, the center of Iran's cancer and MS medication distribution. Their nuclear facility was hit 4 times, and it was warned that if they hit the wrong spot on that nuclear facility, the whole Gulf was going to be uninhabitable from the nuclear fallout. They hit the MIT of Iran yesterday, the Sharif University of Technology, systematically demolished it. Today, a synagogue was hit, and that's the only thing that Israel apologized for. And 6 children under 10 were killed in Tehran last weekend. And most of you have never heard any of this, right? My understanding is that this was part of the Gaza doctrine. This is the war in Gaza has led to what you can see here, the complete destruction of most structures. By the numbers, 81% of all structures in Gaza were damaged. 83% in Gaza City, 89% of Rafah. Over 68,000 people killed over the 2 years of this campaign. In my opinion, it is not a byproduct, but a strategic objective. Gaza was the proof of concept, and Iran is the expansion. It's the same playbook, but on 10 times the scale. This is the Armageddon commanders that we talked about 3 weeks ago, talking about how excited they are for how bloody this is going to be, how it's ordained by God. I feel like this is the right time to mention Netanyahu on the 3rd day of this war said he invoked the first book of Samuel, chapter 15, in which he says, I will punish Amalek. Do not spare him, but put to death both man and woman, child and infant, ox and sheep, camel and donkey. So Netanyahu was invoking this passage in the Bible that says basically kill everyone and everything. And that's what they did in Gaza. And based on these stats of what was destroyed in Iran in this short period of time, it appears to me that that's the same model that they were working towards in Iran. Now, what happened? Did Trump put a stop to it? Or did Iran's fierce response put a stop to it? I'll let you guys be the judge. You can probably figure out where I stand on that one. And if you remember, on the first day of the war, they hit this primary school. Their excuse was it's next to this military base, and basically the military children were going to school here. But it is not, the weapons that we use are very precise. So it's a pretty big mistake. Between 165 and 180 children, girls between 7 and 12 were killed. They were struck individually by precise munitions, and the U.S. clearly intended to strike the school. It was an unlawful U.S. strike, a serious breach of international humanitarian law. A father named Asghar Zareh found his daughter Raha amid rubble, dust, and bloody parts. Her name was Raha. So while we celebrate the end of this war, let us not forget the victims and to pray for them and to recognize that we don't want to let this kind of thing ever happen again. And let's put a stop to all war on the planet right now with our intention, with our prayers. I probably haven't said enough prayers for the war in Ukraine. I think maybe we should do that now. Let's say a prayer for the war in Ukraine. How about we get a ceasefire in that war, like tomorrow? If prayers work to get a ceasefire in this war, maybe they'll work to get a ceasefire in the other war. Dear Lord, Heavenly Father, Divine Mother, beloved friend God, Jesus Christ, we ask that you end all wars on this planet, not just the war in Iran, and also specifically the war in Ukraine, which has been going on for far too long. Put an end to all war on the planet and let humanity understand that we are spiritual brothers with one another and that an age of peace and prosperity can be born on this planet. Amen. Get an amen in the chat. You know, the people in charge of this war, the people prosecuting this war, like Pete Hegseth, have really said some awful things, including Trump. You know, I went over his early tweet, but he basically threatened genocide tonight. And imagine living in Iran the last couple days, or even, you know, longer, that, you know, this entire war, but especially in the last couple days, hearing that he's going to bomb every bridge and power plant. Now imagine if the US was not that strong militarily and like Russia or China issued a threat of bombing every single one of our bridges and power plants. I mean, that is certain death for most people under those circumstances. You know, that brings down refrigeration for your food. That means you can't go anywhere because the bridges have been bombed. That means anybody in the hospital who's on a ventilator is dead immediately, and all sorts of other things. I mean, I don't have to go through all the facts of what would happen in that case, but that's what happened, you know, over the last couple of days. Trump said, I'm going to bomb the power plants and bridges. And maybe he never was going to do it. I really hope that that's the case. He was never going to do it, but I don't know. And it's, you know, obviously a war crime. Not something we should be accepting. So Pete Hegseth, when Trump said in his speech, we're going to bomb them back to the Stone Age, he said, back to the Stone Age. Got 43 million views. He published that only 6 days ago. More quotes from Pete Hegseth. Iran's leadership is in no better shape. Desperate and hiding. They've gone underground. That's what rats do. We will keep pushing, keep advancing. No quarter, no mercy for our enemies. That, again, is a war crime. Saying we're not going to give any quarter to anybody is a war crime, and it puts our soldiers in danger. It's just totally flagrantly insane behavior coming from our quote-unquote leadership. And of course, the quote from Netanyahu about putting to death women, children, and infants. And then, of course, there's been a purge of the highest-ranking officers of the U.S. military in a very short period of time. General Randy George, 41st Army Chief of Staff, forced out April 2nd. General William Green Jr., Chief of Chaplains, was fired, first in U.S. history. Now, that's the spiritual leader of the U.S. military was fired by the people who are invoking Armageddon, right? The people who are excited about recreating Revelation. Now, part of me thinks we haven't gotten out of the woods yet. You know, even though a ceasefire has been declared, we're not out of the woods yet, is my opinion. 12 senior officers have been fired since Hegseth took office. Senator Murphy said, quote, generals are telling Hegseth that his Iran war plans are unworkable, disastrous, and deadly. MIT's Caitlin Tamledge said, this is unprecedented in U.S. history. 30 generals reportedly refusing the ground invasion orders. But this is really the good news. 3 weeks ago, I asked the question, what if they threw World War III and nobody showed up? That's what happened, folks. That's a big part of this. I think the public opposition to this war, which had no lead up, no explanation, no like reasoning, 74% of Americans opposed a ground troop operation. 56% opposed the war entirely. That's the majority. 61% disapproved of Trump's handling of the war. Should be higher than that, but you know, most people are ignorant of the facts. White evangelical Christians, which is the core of people who were in favor of this war, their approval is down to 68%. the 30 generals refusing ground invasion orders. And today, MTG and Alex Jones called for the 25th Amendment to be invoked in the removal of Trump from office. That's how bad those threats were. And when I saw that, I was like, yeah, he's not going to follow through on these threats. At least I was pretty sure. And I didn't think they had the capability to actually follow through on the threats. It would take so much firepower to try to destroy all the things. I mentioned that earlier. But I think that this shows that the ascending consciousness is real. The conscience is awakening inside the machine. So one of the big things that set me off to get on this topic was talking to a lot of Christian friends. And I was describing to them how it looked like they were trying to reenact Revelation. And one of them said to me, yeah, and isn't that prophecy? Isn't that prophecy? Sorry, I don't have everything on. Okay, here we go. So this is what I'm countering tonight. Witchcraft in one sentence. Meeting the horror with spiritual acceptance, right? So the awful things that they're doing, meeting that with some level of acceptance. If you're in my audience right now, it sounds like something you might have thought, this section is for you. I love you and stay with me. I'm going to show you why that response is backwards. So they actually told us the plan in the Denver airport mural, this super creepy drawing that's in the Denver airport. And the Denver airport itself is really sus, built on a complex that's bigger than Manhattan. And in it, it contains this mural, which has almost no explanation in its origin. But it shows this military figure basically killing peace, destroying the world, killing innocent children and women and children. And then on the other end, there's the glorious world peace is declared. I hope that's over. Maybe that first step is over, right? Maybe now we can have world peace be declared. And if we pray hard enough, it might be the case. But basically what you have is violence on one side, and then they dangle peace on the other. That's exactly the playbook that we're watching now, right? The idea that they're going to reenact Revelation and then on the other end of that is something good is, to me, it's a lie. The truth is that prophecy is a warning. Prophecy is not a script, okay? If at any time I announce that a nation is to be uprooted, torn down, and destroyed, and if that nation I warned repents of its evil, then I will relent and not inflict on it the disaster I had planned. That was God speaking to Jeremiah in chapter 18. The Bible has many examples of deadly prophecies that were averted by the repentance of the people there. And this was the main point of my previous stream on this topic. Go watch it. Even though the war's over, it's still super relevant because there are so many people who have fallen into this trap of dispensationalism. Dispensationalism was invented 200 years ago, the idea that we're supposed to create the conditions for Jesus' return. That's the opposite of what we're supposed to do. In fact, in Revelation, it even says clearly that the spirits of demons performing signs will go out to the kings of the whole world and gather them together for the war of the great day of God Almighty at Armageddon. The spirits of demons is what drives people to reenact the playbook of Revelation. It is demonic to begin a war in the thoughts that it's going to bring back Jesus Christ, who taught, love thy neighbor, who taught, love thy brother, who taught to turn the other cheek. It's the exact opposite of Jesus' teachings. And of course, all nations were deceived by your witchcraft. The witchcraft is the enchantment of inevitability. The answer is not cynicism. The answer is verification. It is repentance, it is prayer, and it is the condemnation of this behavior and these actions. Jonah was sent to Nineveh to prophesy destruction, and Nineveh repented and God relented. We went over that on the previous stream. The prophecy didn't fail. It succeeded. It changed the future. That is what prophecy is for. Again, if I predict your house will burn down and then I burn it down, am I a prophet or am I an arsonist? So it looked like they were trying to reenact Revelation. Everything that matched Revelation everything that is matching Revelation, what's happened is under human control. Everything that requires God's action is absent, right? So the people in power were able to launch this on Purim Eve, on Shabbat Zakor, the blood moon. They were able to time it to all that, which is in Revelation. But there's no sun turning black. There's no stars falling, no abyss opening. And as a consequence, I don't think Christ will be returning as a consequence of what they're doing. This is not prophecy unfolding. This is a production team executing the parts that they have a budget for. I made the argument before that these messengers of God, these, saints and Jesus Christ himself, came in the absolute darkest, lowest points of humanity, right? Krishna came during the Mahabharata War. Lao Tzu came during the Warring States period. Buddha came during the descending arc of Kali Yuga right here. And then Jesus Christ himself came at the very lowest point. This is the darkest age at the bottom of this chart, of this 12,000 year cycle. So my argument is that the avatar or the incarnation of Christ comes at the bottom of human consciousness. This is not the graduation of humanity. This is an emergency intervention. Jesus said, "These works that I have done and greater will you do." Jesus wasn't saying, cower in the corner and wait for me to come back. He was saying, be like me. So we want to be able to meet Jesus in heaven and have him say, "You did such a good job, I didn't have to come back." Krishna said this explicitly in the Bhagavad Gita. He said, quote, "Whenever there is a decline in religious practice and a predominant rise of irreligion, at that time I descend myself." So he says very clearly that he comes when things are at their worst. And that is exactly what Revelation describes. And this is actually a doctrine in Judaism that I've heard of, and I should probably do more research on it. But the idea that we should do evil so that we can have the Messiah come back, it is verified by Scripture. It's verified in Revelation. It's even verified in the Bhagavad Gita. If things get bad enough, God will come back to the earth to help out. But that's not what we want. That's not our goal. Our goal is for Jesus not to come back. Jesus not to have to avert the prophecy of 2/3 of the earth being killed by war, famine, destruction. These are not good things. These are not good things for our soul if we participate in these things occurring. So here are two of the lies perpetuated. You are helpless. Nothing you do matters. It's too big, too far away, too prophesized, too inevitable. That's what makes you just keep scrolling, right? And you're not excused because, the lie is that you're excused because you can't do anything. You're free to just look away and theologize it as God's plan, as not your problem. Both lies are designed to produce the same outcome: complicity. Do nothing. we've talked about the life review, the near-death experience, where people encounter often Jesus. Some of them call it the being of light. That's a generic name for it. But he asks the question of every near-death experiencer who has this experience, when the children were being killed, what did you feel? What did you do? Did you make excuses, or did you oppose it with everything you had? We know from the Maharishi effect that our prayers and conscious attention to these problems has a direct impact. And I really do think, our prayers ended this war. I'm going to give credit to our prayers. I know I prayed in earnest, and I felt like my prayers were being answered. I remember the first time I prayed for peace, the very next day was that big headline about peace. Amazingly, there was a study of meditators and their effect on the violence in Lebanon. Lebanon is currently experiencing violence, but when people meditated, it went down. This is actually quality of life going up. So the more meditators there was, the quality of life went up. When the meditators stopped briefly, there was a big dip, and then they came back and it came back up. And you can see how it perfectly tracks it with a P of 0.018. That means a 98.2% chance that this was not by chance. This was a result of the meditation. This is the non-local effects of consciousness. So what do we do when we're faced with this incredible evil? We don't change a thing. The supreme good is like water, which nourishes all things without trying to. It is content with the low places that people disdain. Thus, it is like the Tao. We can be like water. We can continue to flow. We can continue to act in the way of service. We can continue to do the right thing. We can say extra prayers and speak out if we're called to do so. That's what I did today, speaking out. But if we're living our life the right way, we don't need to change anything about what's happening. We can continue to trust God and continue to do the right thing, and God will bring us peace and prosperity. I don't know about you guys, but that water passage, the idea of being water and just continuing to flow, basically having no effect, letting this not have an effect on how we look at the world, how we engage with the world, and most importantly, how we live our lives. If we're living our lives the right way, as I've described on this channel many times throughout all of my material, then we don't need to change a thing. So that was my presentation this evening, folks. I'm going to check in on the chat another time. Oh, wait, wow, I've been going for 2 hours, especially because I started early. Let's see what you guys think about all this. Don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button, folks. If you're watching the replay, leave a comment. I want to know what resonates with you. Even if you're watching this live, write a comment. It's easy to see the comments. It's easier to see the comments than to read the chats later on. It gives you guys more space to write. So I want to know what of my message resonates with you. What questions you have, what directions you want me to take the channel. I'm here for you guys. I'm here to help you guys. As I mentioned in the previous streams, I want people to take me up on the free life coaching that I offer. If you want to spend half hour, an hour with me on the phone, I offer it for free. Talk about anything that you want. Any of these ideas, I offer that freely. Get in touch with me. Join the Discord. Let me know. All right, we got some chats here. Let's see. What did I miss? All right. Matthew says, I ordered more fuel. That's great. Hannah says, gonna order a washboard. Yeah. Get the things that you think you might need, for sure. Ryan says, lying and deception. Is that the value in the dollar, or is that fiat currency in general. Lying and deception. Sorry, it's been a while, so I'm not sure what you're referring to, Ryan. Maybe you can put it back in the chat. Lying and deception, is that the value in the dollar? I'm trying to remember what I was talking about when you might have said that. Yeah, I meant more direct lying and deception, the value in the dollar. I mean, maybe Ryan, you and I can talk about this more because I feel like you kind of have a very idealistic or you kind of take issue with how bad and how stupid fiat currency is. And I agree with you in most ways, but another part of me is like, who cares? The dollar is what it is. It's just a tool. And, it's awful what they do, and it should change. And I agree that it should change, but I'm not going to focus on the dollar as this evil thing, because that corrupts my interaction with something that I interact with on a regular basis. I'm not going to hold this resistance to the dollar because I think that that's a toxic mindset that leaves you needing more dollars, paradoxically. I think when we can release our negative views on money, we can let it flow through our life in a natural way and not be constantly worried about it and focused on it. But this is a long conversation. Ryan says, no, I would not. I don't know what you're referring to there, so you'll need to clarify. Ryan says, I was envisioning what advisors to a nation may say when facing such a disproportionate opponent. You're talking about we're facing Iran. Yeah, I'm curious what you mean. Unfortunately, I'm not sure the context of these comments, Ryan, so maybe you can clarify for me. You guys said amen for the prayer. I'm glad to hear that. We can end war around the planet. We can all enjoy prosperity. Ryan says, particularly if a people are in control through theocratic law. Yeah, I don't know. I've mentioned on this channel before that I'm a philosophical anarchist. I don't think that there's a good way to do government. No matter way you do it, it's going to be ugly. But this is the system we have, and I think most people who work in the government are trying to do the right thing. There's good people there. So, I've come to more of a Taoist understanding of it to not be worried about or thinking about it all the time. I was certainly thinking about it all the time when they started this war, especially when I started looking into the repercussions of this war that we're still going to be facing. But I think the healthiest perspective is not to let it consume you. Tim says, may the divine power protect us who disagree with this psychopath. Which psychopath are you talking about? Which psychopath are you referring to? Ryan says, what would you have a leader of the War Department say to his troops? Of course he's going to say things like that. Yeah, maybe he shouldn't be saying them publicly. I don't know. America holds itself up as this moral standard, and these statements by Hegseth are really not helping that. There's so many things that we lost in standing here. We lost economic standing with the Strait of Hormuz is now under control of Iran, right? Before the war, it wasn't. We've gained nothing from this war other than, we blew up a lot of their stuff. Well, that's really great. Now they're going to plan to build it back bigger and stronger. They have every reason to do that. Now they're going to have way more money to do it because they're going to be charging a toll on the Strait of Hormuz. They're going to be making, I think, like $200 million every day or something if traffic returns to normal. But yeah, on top of that, we've damaged our standing. We've damaged our moral positioning. We've lost credibility. Our military has basically suffered a defeat. The invincibility of the U.S. military has been degraded or has been shown to be false. We wasted 9 years of munitions, again, in a war that doesn't seem to have had any purpose for America. So yeah, today's a great day because of the ceasefire, but it would have been a lot better if nothing had happened, if no war had happened. especially because a peace deal was available, was about to happen. If you look at what was happening, we attacked during negotiations, and the lead negotiator said that they were close to a breakthrough. Obviously, it's possible to reach an agreement. We just did under the worst circumstances, right? To end the war today, or to have a ceasefire. Ryan says, I remember back in the Obama administration that there was all kinds of hoopla about lots of leadership changes. I don't intend to sound like I'm defending their words, but just trying to offer my perspective. Like you said in the beginning, nothing really has changed. Did I say that? Yeah, I mean, I was gonna say that nothing changed because I thought that it was going to be a back down by Trump, but they're going to keep bombing. But the best thing that changed is that the bombing's not happening anymore. So that definitely changed. But yeah, there's still all sorts of things that haven't changed and are lasting problems. And I don't know what's going to happen. But I'm hopeful and I pray for a positive outcome. A positive outcome is certainly more likely when the bombs stop dropping. Tim says, staged and scripted prophecy. Is that what you meant by the psychopaths? Yeah, absolutely. And God does protect us, so you don't have to worry about that. Hannah says, I didn't know dispensationalism was relatively new. I didn't know that either, Hannah, until I was doing this research. Yeah, it was invented in the 1800s by some English guy. So look into that. In fact, I learned from my research that the early Christians warned that revelation could be used to commit political violence. They understood this in 100 AD, and they warned against it. And now today, that's exactly what happened. I think, you look at all the evidence, Revelation, the book of Revelation was used as the excuse for this war. Seems to be the case. Ryan says, someone's war machine runs loose and powerful interests vie for their interests. Sorry. Ryan says, someone's war machine runs loose and powerful interests vie for their interests. Tragedy happens continuously somewhere and the people suffer. Yeah, I mean, the whole point of the war machine is to conduct war, and they profit while people die. So in order to get rid of that, we have to increase the public outcry. Maybe one of the reasons the Ukraine war hasn't ended is because there isn't a public outcry. There was a public outcry all over the world. There were people in the U.S. protesting the war. There were people in Israel protesting the war. There were people in Iran protesting the war. I think there were people in Kuwait and Iraq protesting the war today. From what I saw, the headlines, I was reading almost every headline today. So yeah, maybe we need to protest the war in Ukraine and it'll come to an end. That's the power of consciousness. Sevens is taking notes. Good to see. Hannah says, thank you. I enjoyed it. I don't know if that means you're gone, Hannah, but good night if you are. It's great to have you. Ryan says, I don't hold resistance to dollars per se, just fiat and in general. The time delay in text is hard to have a discussion. The stars and moon are still here, so are we, and so is God. Oh, that was Susan. That's a great statement. I love that, Susan. Thank you. Yeah, I'm sorry about that, Ryan. I do my best on the chat. So if there's a point you want to reiterate, just put it again in there. I know maybe sometimes it's difficult. I'm doing my best to figure out the best way to do that. Maybe there's a better system I can follow to make it easier in the future. But yeah, the sun and the stars and the moon are all still there, and so is God. Thank you, Susan. That seems like a good message to sign off on. That's everything I have for you guys today. Happy Peace Day. Happy end of the Iran War Day. It still hasn't sunk in for me, especially because I've been busting my butt to get ready for this live stream and scrambling to figure out how exactly to deliver the same presentation that I put together. I hope I did a decent job. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Please let me know in the comments and in the Discord. Hit the like and subscribe buttons, and join me every Tuesday at 7 p.m. Central Time for these live streams. I'm Danny with The Way of Service. I love you guys, and I'll see you next week.